At 06:42 on a quiet morning, something happened in Europe that Moscow had spent 2 years insisting would never be allowed to happen. Something that Russian state TV had sworn would trigger the final red line. Something the Kremlin claimed would shatter the balance of power forever. But when it finally happened, Russia could do nothing to stop it. No threats, no ultimatums, no retaliation. Instead, the world watched Moscow simply step back. Because on this morning, soldiers from France, the United Kingdom, and Turkey, 3 major NATO powers, officially arrived inside Ukraine, and Russia's so-called red lines collapsed in real time. To understand why this moment broke Russia's strategic posture, we need to go back just a few days earlier, when Ukraine faced one of the most dangerous situations since the first weeks of the war. Russian forces were pushing harder than ever. Missile strikes hit power plants, causing blackouts. Drone waves targeted civilian infrastructure. And on the front line, Ukrainian brigades were stretched thin, exhausted, and running low on ammunition. Russia believed it finally had the upper hand. Russian commanders thought if they could break Ukrainian defenses before Western support arrived, the dominoes would fall. But they miscalculated. Because Ukraine, instead of collapsing, sent a message to Europe: help us now, and help us quickly. This message didn't come through press conferences or diplomatic statements. It came through urgency, through soldiers on the front who needed artillery shells, through cities losing electricity, through a war that Europe knew could spill across borders if Ukraine fell. And for the first time since the beginning of the war, European leaders decided they would no longer simply send equipment. They would send troops, not to fight Russia directly, but to take over critical rear area responsibilities so Ukrainian soldiers could move to the front. Before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe if you want clear, simple geopolitical breakdowns like this. No complicated academic language, just real explanations anyone can understand. Your support helps us continue. When French President Emmanuel Macron announced his nation was ready to deploy military personnel inside Ukraine, the Kremlin immediately issued its standard warning. Russian officials spoke of catastrophic consequences. Russian propagandists warned of World War III. Military commentators insisted Russia would treat foreign soldiers on Ukrainian soil as legitimate targets. But something unexpected happened next. Instead of backing down, France doubled down. Macron repeated his statement the next day, then again the day after that. And this time, he wasn't alone. The United Kingdom stepped forward, declaring it would send military trainers and support teams. London's position was clear. Ukraine needed help, real help, and the British government was willing to be among the first to act. And then came the surprise announcement from Turkey. Ankara, a country that has played both sides of the war, offered operational cooperation and the deployment of specialized units to assist Ukraine's air defense coordination and drone integration. 3 different nations, 3 different alliances, all moving into Ukraine at the same time. Russia's reaction? Loud in words, silent in action. This is where everything changed. Because for 2 years, Russia relied on psychological red lines, warnings designed to scare Europe into hesitating. But now the warnings were being ignored. And the moment Europe crossed the threshold, Russia found itself trapped. If Moscow attacked European soldiers, it risked triggering a direct conflict with NATO, something it desperately wants to avoid. If it stayed silent, the world would see its red lines as empty. And silence is exactly what happened. French military aircraft landed in western Ukraine with personnel and equipment. British forces arrived to set up training and logistics hubs. Turkish teams coordinated with Ukraine's drone command units. And as this happened, Russian state TV tried to spin the story by claiming Europe had been forced into the war. But the truth was unavoidable. Europe had stepped into Ukraine, and Russia had stepped back. Meanwhile, on the front line, Ukraine immediately felt the shift. By transferring critical rear area tasks to European troops, logistics, repairs, training, air defense monitoring, Ukraine was able to move thousands of its own soldiers back toward critical sectors. Instead of being stretched thin, brigades were reinforced. Artillery crews received ammunition faster. Mechanic units got relief. Drone teams got technical upgrades. The entire system became smoother, more efficient, and more capable of sustaining long battles. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button right now. These deep dive explanations are made for viewers who want to truly understand the war. Not just headlines, but the actual geopolitics behind each decision. What made this moment strategically devastating for Russia wasn't just that Europe sent troops. It was who sent them, and how it changed the balance of power. France, one of Europe's nuclear powers, was now physically inside Ukraine. The United Kingdom, one of NATO's most experienced militaries, was now directly supporting Ukrainian battlefield operations. Turkey, a regional powerhouse with its own drone empire, now strengthened Ukraine's operational capabilities with new intelligence links and flight coordination. These weren't symbolic gestures. Each country brought something unique. France brought air defense specialists, technicians, and rapid response logistics teams who immediately began helping intercept Russian drones. The United Kingdom brought advanced trainers for demining, artillery, and counter-battery warfare. And Turkey brought tactical drone analysts who integrated Bayraktar systems with Ukraine's high-precision drone units operating near key battlefields. Russia understood the implications. The moment European personnel took over rear-area military functions, Ukraine's army gained breathing room. It regained manpower. And Russia's biggest advantage, the belief that Ukraine would slowly collapse under pressure, began to fade. The war's momentum changed. Not because Europe sent tanks, not because Europe sent jets, but because Europe did something Russia never expected. It put boots on Ukrainian soil without fear. As the news spread, something else happened. Smaller nations in Europe suddenly became more confident. Estonia declared it was ready to send its own troops. Lithuania hinted it might follow. Poland increased its military readiness along the border and announced joint training operations inside Ukraine. Romania expanded its cooperation agreements. What began with France had now turned into a chain reaction of European unity. Russia suddenly faced its worst nightmare. Not a divided Europe, but a united one. Inside the Kremlin, panic quietly surfaced. Advisors warned that attacking European soldiers would bring NATO into the war. Military analysts admitted Russia did not have the resources for a wider conflict. Putin's speeches grew more aggressive, but the Russian military's actual movements did not match the rhetoric. Russia could shout, but it could not act. Meanwhile, Ukraine's morale skyrocketed. Soldiers on the front began receiving more supplies, more medical support, more drone batteries, more spare parts. Western coordination teams worked non-stop to streamline deliveries. The pressure that had pushed Ukraine to the edge weeks earlier started to lift. If you're getting value from this, make sure you subscribe. These videos are made for people who want real understanding. Not noise, not propaganda, just clarity. The deeper geopolitical consequence came later. When Russian analysts finally admitted something their government never wanted to say publicly, Russia's red line doctrine had been broken. Once a red line is crossed and you do nothing, it stops being a red line. And when France stepped into Ukraine without fear, Europe learned something very important. Russia's threats were political theater, not military reality. This shift began reshaping Europe overnight. Defense budgets increased. NATO cooperation expanded. Countries accelerated weapons production. And, perhaps most importantly, Europe realized that defending Ukraine was not charity. It was self-defense. Because Ukraine's survival meant Europe's stability. Russia tried to respond by increasing missile strikes. But with French air defense teams assisting Ukraine, interception rates improved. Russian attacks that once caused blackouts now caused little more than temporary grid interruptions. Turkish drone experts also strengthened Ukraine's ability to neutralize Russian reconnaissance drones, reducing Russian artillery accuracy along several frontline sectors. By the end of the week, Moscow's narrative had collapsed entirely. European troops were in Ukraine. Russia hadn't retaliated. The red lines it once declared with confidence were now exposed as hollow. And for the first time since the war began, Ukraine's supporters saw something they had been waiting for. Europe no longer afraid of Russia. When history looks back on this conflict, it will mark this moment as a turning point, not because of tanks or missiles, but because fear shifted sides. Europe showed it was willing to act. Russia showed it was unable to stop it. If you want more clear and simple geopolitical analysis like this, subscribe right now. It helps us keep going, and it ensures you never miss the next major shift in this war.